city's project manager for the study to give you the official city's welcome. So we need to all make sure that we're speaking into microphones tonight because it is being recorded for sharing with the community. So Dana, over to you.
I wanted to start by thanking everyone for coming out tonight. We're just kicking off the community advisory group component of this project. So we've got a few snacks in the back. There's also a restroom out in the hallway to your left. And we're ready to get started.
Excellent. I think just before we get into the detailed overview, most of you applied or were asked to serve on this really important committee for 3 meetings, and the city got to review your applications, but you don't necessarily know each other. So we wondered if we could start by just going around the room and briefly stating why you were moved to apply and or serve on this committee. So again, I'm Kirsten Green, and I'm a land use planner by trade, but I do a lot of facilitation and community engagement, and pleased to be a sub-consultant on this project to Kittleson and Associates. Maybe Susie?
My name is Susan Wright, so I'm a civil engineer. I work for Kittleson and Associates, and we are basically a consulting company working with the city to really dive a little bit deeper into the issues at this intersection, look at some some of our options, both potentially for improvements, but also from a policy side. And that's what we'll be getting into tonight. So thanks for having me.
I'm Christine Connolly. I'm also an engineer with Kittleson and Associates.
And Christine will be helping record our meeting and producing a summary for those. I know some of you are serving for folks who couldn't attend tonight, so there'll be a written record too. Thanks, Christine.
I'm Kelly Reed. I'm a planner with Oregon City.
Dan Fowler. I'm here representing University Business Alliance. I'm also a businessman and developer, and we've assembled 17 acres at this intersection.
Mike Mitchell, I'm the CIC representative. I feel like I'm wearing a couple of different hats. I'm also on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, so I'm concerned about the bicycle and pedestrian impacts of this also. And I happen to live 5 blocks from this intersection, so I'm through it at least twice a day, and my wife travels for her work, and she's through it even more, so I got a personal stake in it too.
Henry McEnroth. I'm the representative from the Transportation Advisory Committee for the city. Also an ex-city engineer and a retired civil engineer, and have been in municipal work for like 40 years or so. So living around here for 20 or so, and just need to understand that I got lots of opinions.
Oh, good.
Bob Mahoney, I was just passing by, I saw the lights on.
Some free cookies, wasn't it?
This guy here beat me out. He serves on that. And that fella over there beat me out at the planning commission level. So I'm a citizen at large, taxpayer, and what have you.
And also president of the neighborhood group?
No, I don't. No, I belong but don't attend.
Nathan McCarty with the Oregon City Development Stakeholders Group, and I'm also on the Clackamas County Traffic Safety Commission. So there's interest from a larger standpoint of people commuting in and out through this intersection, and I also commute through this intersection almost daily.
Hi, I'm Luke Norman with Clackamas Community College. I'm here mainly focused to make it easier for students to get to our campus, especially students who are walking, biking, or taking the bus.
I'm Rick Givens. I'm a planning consultant. I represent a lot of developers in the area and have done a lot of subdivisions in Oregon City. I also live in Oregon City and I do my best not to drive through that intersection is what I do.
I'm Christine Kaczynski. I'm here to represent the Hamlet of Beaver Creek. I'm filling in for Bill Merchant, who will be attending all the other meetings. The community of Beaver Creek has been very concerned about development along Beaver Creek Road because that's their only way in and out of their community. Beaver Creek is pretty much a cul-de-sac. And so that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
David Maybe, I'm with Planning Commission. I beat Bob Mahoney out for this spot. And I'm just the Planning Commission rep. I live in the town, of course, and glad to see there's some county people here. Is there any state people here? Or are we just, there's no state citizens? Yeah.
There are several representatives from ODOT that are participating on the project's technical advisory group. So they're actively engaged, just not here tonight.
Yeah, well, sometimes hearing the citizens' perspective is useful for the technical side.
I'm Renata Mengelberg. I'm on the Oregon City Commission, and I was on the Beaver Creek Road Task Force way back when, so it's exciting to see that progressing. It's the future employment land for the city, so I really care about transportation access to that area from an economic development perspective.
And my name is Caitlin Dials. I'm actually just a local resident. Just recently moved in off Holly Lane area, so very close to the intersection, and planning to be there for many years and kind of have a stake in what that means for the community at large.
I'm Bill Avison with Avison Lumber, kind of the outsider here from Molalla. When you mention ODOT, I do sit on Region 1 Act along with Bill Merchant and one of the 6 people that vote for your county and area. That's kind of why I was interested. And then I guess the main point is Molalla area and the rural areas are growing very rapidly, and this is their main corridor to virtually get to the metro area. It's very difficult even to head towards I-5 anymore. And so I guess we're very concerned or interested, I should say, on what is going to happen on Beaver Creek in 213, and hopefully we can add some input and, frankly, work with ODOT to direct some of their attention out this way. It's been very hard to get the focus until this new act was formed. I was telling Renata and some others that most of the money just kind of got stuck in, as you know, in Portland and Metro. And they're finally realizing that the rural area are providing jobs, and they do need some improvements. They've ignored Highway 13 for years and years. Highway 211 nothing's been done there. So we're really pushing to try to get some of that money. It's very limited, as everyone knows. Thank you.
I'm Michelle Dawn, and I was asked to represent the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce. Where I work is a member of the Chamber of Commerce, so our staff and our customers use this intersection. They have to use this intersection basically to get to our place of business. I'm also a resident of Oregon City, and I use that intersection twice every day, as well as all the members of my family.
My name is John Recklinger. I'm a traffic engineer. I'm the closest thing the city has to a regular traffic engineer. I've got about a 20-year history with the city, helping with the planning department with development review, helping the public works department with any number of variety of small projects. About a 20-year history with the city.
I'm John Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director for Oregon City, and I again want to thank you for participating. I know your evenings are valuable, and we appreciate having you for these meetings. I live in Oregon City as well. I staff the Transportation Advisory Committee, and we know as kind of the creators of the Transportation System Plan for Oregon City that this has been a area of concern for a long time, and some of the older conversations about what should have happened or didn't happen at the intersection are before my time, so you can't blame me for how it is today. I'll just say that much. Sure, but we're definitely, this has been something that since I've started, we've known about it. I think the TSP has forced our hand on this, and as development comes along, we as staff are really just trying to figure out how to balance the needs of a growing, healthy community against the the livability that the rest of the community might want. So this is a really important piece, and I appreciate all of you being here, and I hope we can come to some answers. I think we are here to listen for ODOT as well. I know maybe we can rally them into coming. They are sitting on our technical advisory committee, and we'll be sharing these comments. By the way, this is being recorded, so just smile when you talk on in front of the camera, so that your best face is showing. But anyway, ODOT is keen to the problem, and I think having an R1 Act representative or two is going to be helpful, because the region doesn't get, in my opinion, its fair share of money. So.
Good evening. My name is Laura Turway. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Oregon City. So I have the planning and the building departments. So we obviously do development review. I was a member who participated in the original transportation system plan. I look forward to coming together as a community to find a palatable solution for this intersection. I think we've all been looking forward to this as a long time, and it's nice to see such a diverse group of people and people spending your evenings here with us, trying to come together for the good of the city, and I look forward to this process. Thank you.
So, fortunately, I think my back will be to the camera the entire evening, so that's okay. I'll just speak loudly and clearly. So Susie's prepared, and Kittleson has prepared a sort of a review, a PowerPoint. You received the technical memorandum in your packet. We'll get into the role of the CAG, of this, community advisory group, and at that point, I'd like to just check for confirmation about your role with you. But before that, I believe Laura is going to start us off with just what is an alternative mobility target and what we might be talking about in the next 3 meetings. Laura?
All right. Laura and I are going to tag team this a little bit.
Yeah,
you want me to start? So seems like a pretty group that participates in a lot of things. So when we say TSP, that may or may not sound familiar to you, but the city has a transportation system plan. It's their 20-year transportation plan to complement the land use plan. The idea is that the land use and transportation plan work together. And the city last updated their TSP in 2013. It was a pretty major update. There's some guidance when the city is doing their transportation system plan from the state. There is, and 213 being a state facility, the Oregon Highway Plan also helps to kind of dictate that we need to look at the 20-year needs on the state transportation system as well. And they have a policy 1F, the Highway Mobility Policy, which basically provides mobility targets and says what are their targets for the way their facilities will operate into the future. These mobility targets are a way that the state assesses whether the way an intersection is projected is sufficient or not, and this measure has an impact on development review and land use review and zone changes and the comprehensive plan. So it's a pretty important measure. It's that's the way we assess can the transportation system support the land uses. The existing target in the TSP basically states that the intersection should operate at a volume to capacity ratio of 0.99 or better. Now that's a ratio of how much volume, how many cars are projected to go through the intersection in an hour versus how many cars that intersection can handle in an hour. So at 0.99, it's equivalent to 99%. It's basically saying we're looking into the future and wanting to see if the intersections can handle the amount of traffic that is anticipated to want to go through them. This is a measure that looks at a 1 hour period. I think we all know that you can see a lot of congestion over 1 hour, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, maybe in the evening and in the morning. So this is a measure of that kind of peak evening hour typically, as opposed to all day. So I'm going to let Laura give a little bit more kind of background on the TSP and how this target at this intersection is impacting the city.
You give us an example first of what .99 feels like. Is there another intersection nearby that you could give us as a comparison that is that, or how close to that are we now?
Yeah. When the TSP was done, I think the existing conditions back, I think it was in 2011, was 0.83, I think. And so today it's probably around 0.9 and projected to go a little higher into the future. But what that feels like really kind of varies depending on which approach you might be coming from. That's an overall average. So even if I say it's at 0.99, one side might be over capacity, and you see that the queues, the length, how far back up the traffic is, kind of tends to grow over that, peak 15-minute period. And you have to sit through a couple of lights. Well, that leg of the intersection where you have to look at 2 red lights or more before you get through, that is over 1.0. But some of the other legs might not be over 1.0, and so that number really looks at the average for the intersection, or the most high volume competing movements from all 4 legs. So at 0.99, it's essentially operating, at capacity. They really can't get more through in the hour. There might be more demand resulting in kind of queues on some of the legs, but it doesn't generally mean that. Doesn't mean that all 4 legs have growing queues that take forever to clear, but at 1.0 it would mean that probably half the intersection or 1 or more movements might be experiencing where they have to wait through more than 1 red light to get through. And I don't know what the next closest intersection around here that might experience that, but imagine maybe as you closer to some of the intersections on interchanges on I-205.
Just a quick agenda point, if I may, Laura, before you continue. The PowerPoint is, Susie printed the PowerPoint, or Dana kindly printed the PowerPoints for you, and you have them in your packet. If you don't mind holding your questions through Susie's presentation of kind of the technical memo and the different alternatives, we might be able to get out of here at 8, hearing your feedback after that. So if you don't mind on the alternatives, take notes on each alternative as we're going through. We do want and rely upon your feedback. You will get to that again in just a moment on the role of the community advisory group. As Susie and Dana mentioned, they did review this packet with the technical advisory group, and it took I think was it just a full 2 hours or beyond. So it is a lot of information to get through tonight. It is very technical information. And we're blessed that many, many of you have background and certainly familiarity with this intersection. But just I would ask you to probably hold your questions. We're going to try and have that full last hour really for discussion. I try and have a 50-50 rule of not more than half the meeting of presentation, because we're here to really get your feedback. So do take notes, and we'll want to just take up all that. If you have a burning question, if you don't mind, kind of raising your, if I may, John, just raising your nameplate like this so we can see. And we definitely want to hear each other out and make sure that we all have a chance to weigh in with questions during the discussion portion. But if you have something burning, please just let us know. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks. So it's the desire of all of us to grow thoughtfully. So we create plans. We create a comprehensive plan to provide this guiding document for the city. And in addition, we have plans for infrastructure and how we provide water services and transportation services. And it's up to us to periodically update those. So we did that in 2013-14. And when we did that, we look forward to assume that our city is going to be fully built out. We look at our zoning designation and all that. We run these transportation models and figure out which intersections are congested too much and which ones aren't. For those that are congested too much, we create solutions. We can engineer solutions, add a lane or a signal or whatever the thing is. And in this particular case, when we did our TSP, there were a few places where, though we could think of a solution, we couldn't afford the solution. It wasn't a feasible solution. And we wanted to make sure that when we plan, we plan appropriately. So we don't just write something in the box and move on. We want to take a moment and think thoughtfully about this corridor and this intersection to make sure that we come up with the right feasible solution. And so that's kind of what we did here with this alternate mobility. We set aside this project so that we could have the time to work together as a community to thoughtfully understand what our problem is, why it exists, and how we address it together. We, as a region, we're balancing densities and property rights and transportation and be able to move around. And it's a struggle for all cities. So in this particular case, we're looking at alternate mobility targets. Since we are doing this project now, and we did the TSP in 2014 was when it was finally adopted, we said that we would work on it soon. And it's been 2 years. In the meantime, we thought ODOT was going to do some work, and as a region, we would all work together on this, but that didn't happen. So we were first to update our transportation system plan and realize that, oh no, we have a problem where we have congestion and the solution is not feasible. And so that was exciting. We are a city of firsts. We didn't hope to be first for this. And now it's a couple years later, and we're the first to do this process too. And in the meantime, in our development code, if your use is permitted, so you have a vacant lot and you could build something on it, you can do that, and you'll have trips go through the intersection. That's fine. You do some solutions that are identified in our transportation system plan, which don't get at the meat of the problem. But we said that you can't do any zone changes or anything that would put further impact on the intersection. So there is a strong desire to solve this problem. Not only do we want to solve problems and not have outstanding problems, we want to solve it sooner rather than later, because we have development which could not occur if we don't solve it. And we know that the intersection is just going to continue to get busy, with most of the trips neither starting nor stopping in Oregon City. So it doesn't matter what we do. And so I look forward to solving it together. Just a little history, though. Back when 2014, when we did the TSP, there was other TSPs coming online. Since then, there's about 90 or so of this problem throughout the region. So we were first with the TSP and we're first with this. So you're going to see more other jurisdictions do this to try and figure out what to do when we could surely engineer a solution, but we surely can't actually get it in the ground. So more to come. It's exciting as we move forward and we trailblaze yet again. Mm-hmm.
So the objectives of this project are, as Laura had mentioned, to really look at this intersection again and have a really thoughtful conversation on what are our options, look a little bit deeper again into what are some of the alternatives to improve the intersection, and not just about more capacity for cars, but just make sure that we're doing everything that we can be at the intersection for bikes and pedestrians, making sure the buses can get through, and then seeing if there's anything else that we can do to just improve the general safety of the intersection, and then if there are still any elements that could be done to potentially provide some incremental increase in the capacity for the intersection to handle more cars. So we want to look at that a little bit closer. But as Laura said, we do know that as part of the last TSP update, there was an interchange on the books at this location that was essentially kind of removed in the last TSP update, as Laura said, because it was found to be kind of financially unfeasible, and we didn't want to be in the situation where we're continuing to bank on that, but knowing that it really wouldn't be a reality. So we want to look again, are there any feasible improvements that we could be looking at, and then identify whether an alternative target is necessary. And by alternative target, really what we mean is, can we find a different way to measure the intersection than volume to capacity that would really still help us track how the intersection is performing and whether it's safe and if people are able to get through it in the majority of the hours of the day, or how long does it take people to get through the intersection. So this is going to be one of our subjects for the next meeting. Today we're really here to talk about our kind of relook at what are some of the alternatives for potentially still improving the intersection for more capacity. One of the subjects of our next meeting is going to be kind of talking about what those alternative measures might be. And so, yes, when we talk about alternative measures, we are talking about essentially accepting a higher level of congestion at that intersection, but still controlling it in a way where we still have factors that we care about that we want to track and monitor. But it's admittedly accepting some higher levels of congestion so that you have a means with which to the city has a means with which to kind of continue their comprehensive planning and look at zone changes, for example, which is does that make sense? Am I saying that well, Laura? Okay. And I think what we're going to end up with in the end is likely a combination of the two. Probably need to look at different ways to measure it in the near term. Maybe that there are some options for some near-term improvements, but do another look at, is there still another viable long-term solution that we might possibly start considering. So we're going to be meeting again in February, as I said, for a discussion that's a little bit more focused on what are some of the different ways that we can measure how the intersection is performing. And then our third meeting is to come back together jointly with the technical advisory group and really discuss what the final recommendations are for this combination of improvements and changes in the way we look at measuring the intersection. Do you want to just pause on that?
Sorry. So you all have served on a lot of committees, and you're experienced professionals in your own right. But I just wanted to see if we could generally kind of understand what our role is here, and some modicums of agreement or respect as we go through the process tonight. This sort of ground framing meeting where we're just hearing the possibilities. It'll get progressively, I think, more challenging as we go ahead. So why don't we get into how we're going to make decisions here just for a moment. You have the CAG role there on the PowerPoint. It's this is again quite straightforward from the committee work and the commission work you're used to doing, but providing review and comment on the technical memorandum. So that's an active, meant to be an active verb there. You're welcome and encouraged to comment on the technical memoranda and not just take it as given. They are provided as draft to you for a reason. So we rely on your review and comment on those to help the city assess the feasibility and practicality of the improvement alternatives. So to really put, thinking caps on and to help Renata in her role as commissioner and guide the city in the judicious use of resources. And then to provide input on these alternative targets. In doing so, I wonder if I could offer just kind of 3 principles to do this of listening, learning, and guiding, and really listening to each other. You heard in the introductions, we have a wide range of perspectives here, folks newer to processes, but also some seasoned professionals around the table. And I don't know if you could get a richer group. So please take advantage of that and listen and try and understand each other's perspectives, learn from the technical memoranda, ask questions. The point about ODOT representation was very well taken, and I think we probably could invite them to attend, or a representative to attend the CAG meetings as well. And then also to provide guidance. So your role here as CAG members is to provide guidance to staff, who will then make a recommendation to the Planning Commission and City Commission. So your guidance here goes directly to Laura and to Dana in their work of directing the consultants. So you're right at the source here. We'll generally operate through consensus, just in the providing of guidance. But if there is a strong minority opinion that would wish to be represented to staff, Planning Commission, and City Commission, we're certainly available to do that in the meeting summaries as well. Are there any questions about operations or the 3 meetings schedule? Thank you for rescheduling off our weather-laden December there and coming back tonight. Any questions, concerns? If not, then we will keep going with the meeting. Please, Bill. No meeting on the May date. Yep. Okay. Not just a typo. Thank you for checking. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Straightforward. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And Susie, then back to you. And please make yourself comfortable. Use the restroom. Get refreshments whenever you'd like. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to try to talk through my presentation. You have the full set of slides there in front of you. I'm going to try to talk for no more than 22 minutes on the clock and make sure that we reserve a full 60 minutes for discussion and to hear from all of you what your thoughts are on the alternatives and things that the city and the project team should be considering. So fortunately, it sounds like you guys are all very familiar with this intersection. So Highway 213, as you know, is a 4-lane roadway. It has a 55-mile-an-hour speed once you get north of Beaver Creek. South of Beaver Creek, it is a district. Both north and south, it is a state facility. It happens to be a local truck route. South of Beaver Creek, it has a multi-use path on the east side of the road. Beaver Creek Road is a 4-lane roadway, 2 lanes in each direction with the center turn lane in most locations. It has a little bit slower speed than 213 at 35 miles an hour. It is still it's a major arterial in the city's plan. The west leg of the intersection, Beaver Creek Road, is a city street, east leg, county road. So this makes this a very complicated location with ODOT, the city, and the county. And I should say the county is part of our technical advisory team as well. There is a bus operating on Beaver Creek Road, and Beaver Creek Road has sidewalks and bike lanes. That tells you a little bit about some of the facilities there, but this road is placed in a very interesting location. As many of you know, there's a lot of constraints. There is a stream that runs under the north leg of the intersection. We have wetlands surrounding that stream, both in the northwest and northeast corner of the intersection. There's a lot of steep slopes and geological hazards. There's been some of the landslides that have occurred northwest of this intersection, up the same creek that crosses under the intersection. And we know that anything that we do to this intersection, if it requires the back of that sidewalk to move out because we're widening the road or moving the road, anything we do that might change where that kind of full footprint of that intersection is going to require likely extensive amounts of earthwork, culvert extensions, wetland mitigation. And so you'll see that we have some pretty large ranges on our cost estimates. So to really refine that on any of these, we're looking to kind of see which ones seem palatable, if any, before we kind of dive to a deeper level. But we know that there's a lot of challenges with this intersection for anything that would change the footprint. See. Do I have this is the northwest intersection. As I was mentioning, this is a retaining wall here behind the sidewalk, and it's pretty darn tall. It's about, John, is it about 10 feet tall in this northwest corner? Taller than that. Probably maybe twice that. Yep. 5 feet in some places. It's pretty long. There's also the creek, the culvert runs under the street here. And there's also a retaining wall here, and that also is a pretty significant drop. Highway 213, as you go this way, if you looked at any road widening, there's kind of, concerns about this structure, as well as, anything that impacts this corner of the intersection. So from operations, by operations we're talking about traffic. So we mentioned earlier that the standard for this intersection is basically 0.99. We went back and looked at what was in the TSP when the TSP was created, and also looked ahead at what was projected for the intersection, and we looked at what were traffic volumes today. And what we've been seeing is that traffic volumes have been growing about 2% a year since the TSP was updated, and that is consistent with the growth rates that were in the TSP, which basically was a validation for us that we're still feeling pretty confident in the projections that are in the TSP at this point, and that we are anticipating kind of slow and steady continued growth at this intersection. From a safety standpoint, that is a high collision intersection. The TSP looked at crashes from 2010. No, I'm sorry. We looked at crashes from 2010 to 2014, that data doesn't become available immediately. So 2014 is the last year of full data. This intersection kind of statewide is in one of the top 5% of what ODOT assesses as some of its highest crash locations. And that a lot of this has to do with drivers' expectations of the traffic signal when they're headed southbound coming from 205. It's a very rural expressway, as you know, and people oftentimes startled coming upon the intersection. There are improvements planned in this area in the transportation system plan. So to address that safety issue that I just mentioned about people coming down the expressway and kind of surprised by the signal, there's plans for an advanced warning system, so it helps people before they get to the intersection, more advanced lights and letting them know that the light is there and if it is red. Lengthening the left turn lanes for the eastbound approach. So that is when you're eastbound on Beaver Creek and wanting to make a left turn on to 213 to head towards I-205. So lengthening those the turn storage. So when you're wanting to make a left turn, you're not getting stuck in the through lane and then blocking people that want to go straight. And that's, I believe, under design. John, do you have a kind of a timing? So that's an improvement that's a little bit more imminent.
Right, and it's soon to be out to bid. So yeah, it's out to bid. We bid it a couple of times, didn't get a lot of response, and so we're going to bid it again early spring or now. So the idea would be to build something this summer.
So that's an improvement that's pretty imminent. So the city is moving forward with the things that are in the TSP. Outside a greater area around this intersection, there's a number of other improvements in the area, roundabouts, road extensions, really helping to provide some alternative routes as well as road widenings. So we did look at a pretty, we did at this point just look at just this intersection because the TSP is very new, and then the TSP really looked at the possibilities for new connections, alternative routes, and really tried to maximize what the opportunities were through that citywide planning process. So that's why we're taking a pretty narrow look at this intersection on its own through this process to make sure, is there anything remaining that we can do here? And if not, what are some of our other kind of policy solutions? So as that first step I mentioned, we took another look at what is in the realm of possibility that could improve this intersection. And we looked at 4 alternatives that I call at grade. At grade meaning there's no bridges, no over-under. Basically everybody is at the same elevation. Basically improvements or changes to the intersection. So we have 4 alternatives that we looked at grade, and then we re-looked at 3 potential interchange forms to just see if there was any potential value or benefit from a lesser interchange or a different kind of interchange than was maybe considered previously. So first I'm going to do is step through the 4 at-grade intersections, at-grade alternatives. So the first alternative...
So this is one, if I may, Susie.
Yep.
A major transition here. At the end of this, and at the end of Susie's presentation, we'll welcome your questions and comments about any of the alternatives. Maybe we'll just walk through them one by one. We'll loop back around and walk through them one by one. And the outcome of tonight, what we're looking for, I think it's shown right there on the agenda, is, should we further investigate any? If so, which ones? So which of these should we carry forward as we go forth? And then that third question, should we proceed with investigating alternative mobility targets or proceed with both? My hope would be to kind of go around and hear from everyone before we close, but have an open discussion before that. So just wanted to provide a moment before Susie rips through these next 7 alternatives. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you're right. It's a good reminder. I've got like 12 minutes. A minute and a half per alternative. I'm going to spend a little more time on the first 4, and I'll go faster through the last 3. But yes, so that is a good point. That is something that we're going to be kind of in our last hour of discussion is kind of some thumbs up, thumbs down, gut checks on do any of these solutions look like things both from a physical standpoint as well as a cost standpoint? Does it tell you, yes, this is something I'd like the city to still consider, or no, this is just going to be far too expensive or too impactful? So the first alternative includes constructing 3 left turn lanes coming off of 213, southbound lefts, so coming from 213 onto Beaver Creek Road. And the pink and the green doesn't mean anything in particular other than these are the new lanes. So it's triple left, southbound left, and so that would require some widening of 213, a little widening here to accept that left turn, and that third lane would probably have to extend all the way to past the shopping, or to the last shopping center driveway. And then in tandem with that, we would construct an additional northbound through lane on 213. Not shown here, but what the technical advisory committee told us was we would also need to add a right turn lane. It wasn't acceptable to just convert the existing right turn lane to a through lane, that we needed a separate right turn lane. So that is a modification to this alternative. What we found was that this improvement would get us to a volume to capacity ratio of 0.990, so a 9% reduction. We think it is likely to not impact the northwest and northeast corners. We think that this widening can be done within the existing kind of back of pavement. It does increase the crossing distances for bikes and pedestrians on essentially 3 legs. It would make this crossing wider, as well as this one wider when we add the right turn lane. But our cost estimate on this is in that, what we're calling that, it's still high, but I'm calling it the mid-range for today, and the $5 to $10 million range. And as I said, a lot of that has to do with on whether can we do this with or without impacting these retaining walls. Alternative 2 is called the Quadrant Road. Essentially, it's called it would be instituting an indirect left turn. So that means you would no longer be making a southbound left here. To make this southbound left, you would go through the intersection, make a right turn, and make a right turn, and come around. So this was really only getting us about a 5% gain in capacity. And what we learned through the advisory committee meeting was that this property right here has a development application that's been approved. So this property is essentially under development at this time, not making it as such a great looking connection as it looks in this aerial. And there's some problems moving it further south with developments, and moving it further north is just not enough distance from the intersection. Our technical advisory committee didn't feel really positive about this alternative, but it was they thought it was interesting. One of the drawbacks is that now, instead of where you were making a left turn here, those people who were turning left now have to go through the intersection twice, to go through and through. So it does provide some benefit, but I don't know that the cost benefit is necessarily there.
Susie, if we could share that the technical advisory group did recommend, is it 1, 4, and 6 to be carried forth? Did I get that right? I mean, just to provide the benefit. So maybe after we go through
1 and 3.
1 and 3 just going forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the committee had still had concerns with alternatives 1 and 3, but yeah, for context, for your own thoughts, 1 and 3 seem to be the best solutions of these 7 to the technical advisory committee. However, ODOT raised concerns with the triple Fs, basically saying that they probably would not. They didn't say that they wouldn't approve them, but at the staff level, they basically said that these are very problematic. I don't know if we would approve these. They do exist in other places around the county. So,
sorry to interrupt there, but I just wanted to say that you have the benefit of the technical review coming before you. Thought just share, because I know that getting strong reactions against number 2 already. Just wanted to say you're not alone. So thank you. Keep going.
And there was quite a bit of interest in alternative 3, which I'm going to be talking about right now. But I think the concerns were still, it is a new intersection type, but I think it's one that is going to be starting to show up in more locations. They would be pretty new to Oregon, but they are very popular in other parts of the United States, not just internationally. But there was concern about could this be done within the retaining walls or not, and that would be a pretty major factor in the cost estimate. So 1 and 3 looking like having the most potential, but still some concerns, but maybe warranting additional investigation. Yep. So this is what we call displaced left turns. And so you're still allowed to turn left at the intersection, but what this treatment does is you have a second small traffic signal upstream. If you want to turn left here, you basically get into left turn lanes here. So you get into left turn lanes early, and you stop, or you might have a green, and you cross the road, and your travel lanes cross the road, and you come here, and you wait till you have a green. And then essentially the left turns get to go on the same green that the throughs get to go on. Southbound as well as northbound throughs. So now you're able to move southbound lefts, southbound throughs, and northbound throughs all at the same time because you have moved those lefts to the other side of the roadway. And you've done that at a time when there was a gap in the signal and you're really not creating additional delay or time to get through that intersection. They're coordinated. It's essentially the same signal. You end up with like a different signal head here. It's operating under the, I know this sounds technical, it's the same controller, so it's one intersection, but you're controlling everybody together, but you're crossing those lefts in advance. This would also require the construction of a right turn lane. And I think the real concern from a constructability standpoint on this was the widening, any potential widening in this section of 213. So this VC you'll see is 0.86. That's the biggest bang for those dollars that you've seen out of any of those alternatives that I've showed you so far. So I think this is what's really attractive. It's a big gain in capacity for not a major improvement. And in other locations where you don't have these kinds of geographic and environmental hazards, this type of improvement is much more economical. So alternative 4 was essentially doing this type of treatment for 2 legs of the intersection instead of just one. So I already showed you how the southbound lefts would cross over, and they would be able to travel with the northbound and southbound throughs. This is showing that we're actually doing it for the eastbound lefts as well. Eastbound lefts, they get into their left turn lane early, right here. They have a signal that tells them when they're allowed to cross over into this storage area, and then they get a green and can turn left at the same time as these movements. And so this resulted in a volume to capacity ratio of 0.81, a little bit of improvement over doing just one leg. But this definitely has kind of pretty severe impacts to the retaining wall and the kind of wetlands and the topographic impacts here. So which is why this has a pretty substantially higher potential price tag. That's the end of the at-grade intersections. I'm going to buzz pretty quickly through 3 interchanges that we looked at. We looked at a full diamond interchange. So this is a pretty traditional interchange. You've got 4 ramps, and off, on, off, and on, kind of controlled by 2 intersections. But as you can see here, there's very significant impacts to existing development in these 2 corners. Very impactful to the wetlands and the retaining walls in these 2 corners. So very large footprint, price tag of $25 million or greater. That's probably very conservative, very low. And you'll see the VC ratio of 0.82, and it's about the same as some of those displaced left turn alternatives. So then the question was, can we do a half interchange and get some benefit at a lower cost? That half interchange would really include southbound off-ramp and a northbound on-ramp. and you lose your northbound lefts. Northbound lefts would then have to occur all the way down at Malala, and your westbound lefts would have to occur at Myers Road extension. So you're losing functionality with this kind of type of half interchange. So you'll notice there's no way to make a northbound left or a westbound left. If you wanted to turn left from here, you're going on the on-ramp. Or if you're coming off the off-ramp, you can go both directions. But half interchange with this configuration, half the movements. Still at a pretty high price tag, very high price tag, and still, although a good volume to capacity ratio. So then the question was, could we do a single point interchange, or there's another variation of this called a tight urban interchange. So some people are wondering, well, can't we just do a really small, tight one without having so many impacts as the first interchange? But I think you'll see that even if you have it really tight, you still have very significant impacts to existing development and the wetland area. So just kind of, here's a summary of the 7 alternatives. So alternative 1 being the 3 triple lefts and the triple throughs in the northbound direction. And these were the resulting volume to capacity ratio, which is that performance standard that currently guides the intersection. The indirect left on just the one approach, the southbound left, got us to, the indirect left was where we went through, and you have to go through the intersection twice. 0.94. The southbound displaced left, which was the one where the left crosses over early. It's kind of a new intersection control type, 0.86. If we did it on 2 legs, we got to 0.81. And then these are the 3 interchanges that are all right there around 0.8. Very similar to the 2 displaced lefts, and but I think it's really notable that the single displaced left is not very significantly worse than any of these interchange forms, and significantly better than alternative 1 and 2. So we wanted to look at these improvements not just for capacity, but what were some of their right-of-way, environmental, bicycle, and pedestrian impacts, as well as kind of provision of movement. This slide is in your handout as well as in the memo, but this was a quantitative assessment kind of each alternative. Green meaning that it had a no impact or minimal impact, or a positive benefit. Yellow being might have no impact or slightly negative impact, and red being a very significant negative impact, either high cost, eliminating movements, etc. Because of time, I don't really want to dive into all of these. I talked about these pros and cons as I went through each alternative, but if you want to have questions about some of these assessments, we can go into those as you raise your questions for me. And with that, I think I'm going to let Kirsten kind of transition us into dialogue, and I might
go back to number 1.
Actually,
I would just go back to number
okay.
1, yeah. So if we could go through just any questions or comments on each one, and then wrap up, if we can, by about 7:30, if we can wrap up and be making sure we know which of them we'd like to carry forth for further study and not. I don't think we need the full 15 minutes for next steps at the end. So if we reserve 5 minutes there at the end for Susie and Dana to recap our next steps, we have a good amount of discussion ahead of us. So number 1, any questions or comments on this, please, Mike? And if you have others, if you don't mind just raising your tag so we know how many of us would like to speak on each thing. Mike first, please, then Rick and Dan.
So on that third southbound left turn lane, what's the destination? Where does the traffic that's in that third lane, where is it ending up? And the reason I'm asking, one of the things that started happening recently that really isn't addressed here but impacts the intersection is left turns onto Maple Lane are overfilling that left turn lane because it's quite short. So the inner lane, the inner eastbound lane of Beaver Creek is jammed up by people who can't make the left onto Maple Lane.
Are you clear on
So-
that, Susie? Or would you like Mike to...
Where's
Yeah.
that third lane
Right.
gonna go? It's already backing up. People can't get out of that.
Gotcha. So
See
it
what I
backs
mean?
up into the interchange,
Yes.
the intersection, yeah.
Yeah.
The traffic to Maple Lane.
The traffic that's trying to turn left onto Maple Lane is backed up into the inner lane of Beaver Creek.
Okay.
And clear back into the intersection. I've been stuck, fortunately stopped before I made my left turn, but people end up stuck in the middle of the intersection because that leftmost lane, the inner lane, is backed up clear to the intersection. So I guess my question is so we put a third left there, where does that third left lane end up?
And that may have been part of ODOT's concerns, is that...
No, not that specifically. I mean, I think the growth in that movement is coming from Beaver Creek, from the concept plan area to even further out Beaver Creek Road. You're right. There could be some increase on Maple Lane as well, and that's something we can look into. But what's really driving it is, growth east of this area.
So your point, Mike, is that this doesn't really take care of the problem. This
It could exacerbate a problem you're
Yeah,
identifying.
because now you got more people coming around
Yeah.
the corner and they're still jammed up trying to turn onto Maple Lane.
I think part of the answer, Mike, is that Susie has shown a pink lane there, which is an additional lane eastbound on Beaver Creek Road. So there So there are 3 lanes making the turn and 3 receiving lanes. So there's 1 additional lane added.
Okay.
The pink one.
Okay, so
We're saying that this
So-
storage here is not adequate for people turning left there.
Right.
And we might be putting more people there that would continue to.
So we'll hold that as a comment and a question. And again, Christine, I'm very grateful for taking notes and grabbing these comments. So you see these comments reflected in the meeting summary as well. So thank you. We have a bunch of folks that are interested in weighing in on this one. So Rick, Dan, then Christine, Damon, and Bill. So Rick, please, if you would.
My first question was just kind of a general one. The design horizon we're looking at with all these solutions is 20 years, is that correct? I mean,
Yeah, it's the TSP horizon here, 2035, although.
Which is full.
Yeah.
Which is full build out.
Okay. I guess in looking at these different alternatives, looking at them with a 20-year horizon is logical, but I guess one other thing that occurs to me is, if you spent the money on some of the other solutions, would there be potentially easier modifications to some of those designs in the future beyond 2035? In other words, are we creating a short-term solution in a long-term mess? So I don't really have the answer to that right now, but that's just something that occurred to me as I was looking at it.
Thank you. Thanks. I think we had, sorry, I've got you on a different page here. Dan next, and then Christine.
Just a couple of thoughts, questions. Did they look at, and I'm not saying in favor of these, are just questions, but did they look instead of 3 lanes, a longer stack of 2 lanes? And I realize that might mean a longer light weight coming off of 213. That's one just question. Is it possible if it stays 3 lanes to 3 lanes that one of those lanes becomes a double left onto Maple Lane, which might help your comment? We see that at 43 and A Street in Lake Oswego. And then it seems like there's a lot of thought on the nighttime traffic coming through, but there's also issues with the daytime traffic leaving. And so my comment about that would be the same for all these alternatives. Is there an impact in the morning traffic that crossovers hurt or help and those things? The last comment in general is we're moving into a changing world in terms of automobiles with electric cars, self-driving cars, things that they say will improve sequencing and tuning and those kind of things. Normally they were talking about that being 10 to 20 years away, and it seems to be advancing a lot quicker than probably any of us thought. So I don't know how that plays into the standards we come up to, but it will have hopefully a positive impact on some of them. So just a general comment.
That's great, Dan. Thanks. Susie, that was good food for thought. Any responses yet on the automated vehicles and electric vehicles? And
yeah, I mean,
what's your crystal ball show?
You don't
yeah,
have to.
but no,
That's
to
what I
Sal's
put on the
point,
spot
I think
for fun
that
to
is
see.
an issue that people are grappling with, not just locally but nationally. And we know that technology and the way people travel is changing, and we don't want to be too short-sighted with major investments. So it is an issue that people are dealing with at all levels. There's no magic solution to that.
Thanks for raising that, though. It's akin to this nature of beyond 20 years, so it's hard enough to project 20 years with the technological advances what might happen. So it does get hazier the further out we look.
I think it is definitely leading to many people holding back on moving forward with some of these major infrastructure improvements.
Well, time and resources are short as well, so we're just sort of wait and see on some of the things. Christine, please.
So once everybody agrees on an alternative and you get to the point of starting construction, at the same time large development is being approved along Beaver Creek Road, it seems at some point what you're trying to achieve will be canceled out by large development, even more and more and more cars. What do you do then, because you're still within that 20-year horizon?
It's a great question for the coordination of land use and transportation planning. And Susie, do you want to touch on that, and maybe Lauren as well? But
well, yeah, what John just mentioned, the volume projections that we're using for these numbers that I'm citing at 0.99 or 0.9 are the traffic volumes projected out 20 years, and those are assuming full build out of the city's urban land use zoning and reserves.
To the urban growth boundary zoning. Includes all of our concept plan areas. It includes redevelopable land, so much more than just vacant lots.
And not just, that's citywide.
And it goes in a model that includes the same for everywhere else in the metro region.
Christine, it seems like, your point is well taken, because it seems, you'd almost have to kind of get out the land use maps too and look just to confirm your concerns, which are that, wow, it seems like this happens and then this happens and that this happens, and did they really plan for that? And I think what you're hearing is that yes, as surprising as it may seem, there's so many areas that are zoned higher than are currently underdeveloped. As you know, some are vacant, and then all of a sudden, growth starts to occur. It's like, oh my goodness, it seems like change is happening so fast. But the underlying zoning, if we do compare the zone, planned capacity to what's being forecasted here, they should be 1-to-1. But you're right to be conservative in that you do want to plan for full build out, as John has been saying. Not 80% of build out, not 50% of build out, but full build out. Any other comments on that?
Well, they need to take into account all these cottages that are being allowed. And also the lots are no longer even R6 or R5. We're getting down to R2.5, which is extremely, extremely dense. And if we're not going to build any more roads, it just seems like, I'm an old Californian. I've already seen this in my lifetime. And I don't want to see it again. And I kind of, you're coming out with all this volume over capacity, but it just seems like we're developing at such a rapid pace that this intersection is going to continue to just get overloaded and overloaded. And it is full of landslides. What are you going to do if you have a big landslide? It's not really a highway. when you have a wreck or you have a landslide on this bypass, there's no parallel roads to get cars out. So people could be stuck there for a very long time. I don't know if people take that into consideration.
It's a point well taken. I think we just want to hold that and make sure that is addressed, so we can get back to you on that, because I suspect in the city's emergency preparedness, they're looking at, positive redundancy to some of the major roadways. But point well taken. I think probably the ADUs and the smaller lots were taken into account in the land use capacity analysis. As hard as it is to believe, we do plan to intensify. You're right.
Yeah, and just another thing about transportation planning is that we do our TSP to do this long-term solution for the city, assuming full build-out, and then as development occurs, they also do another transportation study and analyze the intersections again. So we're kind of looking at this bigger picture and then smaller scale when development occurs as well.
Thanks, great. Thank you for those, Christine, though. Excellent point. Statement, please, sir. Thanks for your patience. From the Planning Commission.
Well, I guess my first question is I have questions about throughout the whole presentation.
Yes, we're going to go one by one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because some of them have to do with some of the charts and stuff she brought up. So, the one thing I don't see in any of this, and this is again anecdotal. I drive it, and this is what I observe is. First off, I'm glad to see that we're going to move the lane further closer to First Street for the turn. Because that's one area that is congestion, is you lose, a lane. And I think we could almost solve large portions of my observed choke point issues if the Beaver Creek to 213 right-hand turn, it has no run out. It pulls up, boom, it's in that lane. And I think, going north.
Okay.
I think,
going east or going north?
no, coming there. Yeah, that turn. There is no run out for that turn. And I think there's a lot of room there. I think, putting a retaining wall up or whatever and running a, 100-yard or whatever run out would let that traffic just flow and go and merge. You still have the problem of the Maple Lane intersection because people are going to be stopping for that light, but the traffic's going to be cleared out of the turn. And then if you just widened the south part where the purple or the pink line is on Beaver Creek up through Maple Lane so that there is room for queuing, I think you get people out of there and there is room for people to queue. Maybe, not everybody, but not everybody can anyway. And where I observe the accidents happening is at Maple Lane when they're trying to do the left turn in because there's that blinking yellow and they can't see over that ridge, and here comes the car at 35 and the guy's making the turn and it's a car and a truck or whatever. And so there's that, and then when somebody wants to, they're making the turn onto 213 without there being any room, they're like, oh, there's a gap. And they're looking at the gap and not the fact that the car stopped in front of them. And I see rear end after rear end right there because the car in front of him stopped because he didn't want to take that gap. And so, I think because what I see for the southbound traffic, I see people clearing out of that intersection fairly well. In fact, I've been all the way back at the curve, which is off the screen, and the lights turn green, and I've made the intersection. Where the problem is where you have a lumber truck or a truck loaded with something who's stopped, and he's the first one off the light, and he's first gear, first gear, first gear, first gear, first gear, second, lights red. Oh well, 3 cars made it, too bad, But I think that just happens. I mean, it's an uphill stop. So I think we can get a lot of bang for our buck with the improvements on the Oregon City side of Beaver Creek, where you're backing up the turn lane, giving us more queuing room. And just making those two little corrections, I think, you know, you're going to drop your VOC a huge amount.
So those being, why not just do this right turn lane and a receiving lane for it, so it can free
Just
free
put a
flow.
receiving lane, you know, like I said,
Right turn,
there's a
free-flowing
lot
right,
of room for it.
and a receiving lane here to help, even though, and not do this southbound left.
Yeah, not put an additional turn in there, just have room for
And-
the
and
people
not-
to queue and
yeah.
the people to go around the queue.
Yep, and we wouldn't change this, but can we get some benefit by just doing the essentially the widening here? and
Well, you
here,
don't even have to widen
maybe even
it.
here.
You just need to run out the northbound lane. I mean, if you go back two
Sorry,
shop
this.
two slides to the photograph,
Mhm.
there. Look, there's no queuing. There's no room for a car to get up speed. He stops, he's done. But look at there's already a lane there. If you just let him just take off up that lane for,
Well, it's a shoulder.
well,
we
it
would-
is,
Yeah,
but
would
it
have
could be
to
a
widen.
lane.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I mean,
I know I'm out of sequence, but can I piggyback? We've studied that very thing.
And it's your
Okay,
property.
we've
we
presented
cut
it to
into.
ODOT already preliminarily. And Damon, you're exactly right. I have literally walked that road with a wheelie and measured it. You could have a 1,200-foot extension lane, a merge lane.
Yeah.
You could create a free right. You could bury it for partway or double stripe it for partway or cone it for partway, so there's no quick merge. And you can. It's like expanding the end of a funnel.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to allow more traffic to free right, and you're going to start eliminating the backup on Beaver Creek and Maple Lane coming on. It helps it work better.
I appreciate that. And Dan, just so we can make sure to get the comments, and we have a couple more, and we're still on number one, which it sounds like it's an option that has merit, so it's hopefully we're spending
We can look at a few more.
good amount of time.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see, Mr. Fowler, if the city had your drawings that you'd done previously to share with Susie.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so, okay, all right, thank you. And Bill, you've been patient, and then we also have Bob and it is Henry. Thank you. That are waiting.
I
Thank
actually
you.
could yield my
all
comments
right.
were not really on alternative one. They were more general. Do you want that now? Well, if you could skip back to the existing conditions slide just for a second. I think this has kind of been brought up by several folks in the room, showing the growth rate. The 2%, again, I guess, is the build out in Oregon. And the rural areas, again, are seeing a much larger percentage growth, particularly Molalah's like bouncing up to 9 and 10%. And
This is per year, which I assume you're also talking about per year.
per year.
Yeah.
It's pretty major. So I guess just kind of an overall 10,000-foot look at this. I know the expensive projects may be out of reach right now, but if you do something that's very cost effective now, it very soon will probably be inoperable, you know, with the growth, just not from Oregon City, but from the other areas that are using growth. The other thing I was interested in the accident severity rate.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many of those were people running red lights? Because I know that does happen. And the next question, have they considered red light cameras at this intersection? Because that does kind of stop that, particularly if you look at I-5 and by Bridgeport and some of the areas in Washington County.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, it's improved the flow because obviously every accident is going to slow down the flow. So I didn't know if that's been in the...
And Oregon City
so-
is one of the approved cities to have red light cameras.
Yeah.
John wants to speak, but I was just going to say real quick, we don't know how much was red light running, but we do know the types of crashes that occur when people run red lights are turning and angle crashes, as rear end crashes are those more likely when people are not expecting the queue when they come up to it from behind it. So the red light running crashes tend to be these turning and angle type of crashes.
Yeah, so the red light cameras we've considered in Oregon City, we've decided against them because they also have their fair share of accident results. Mostly that rear end number that's already pretty high definitely goes up a ton. And you know, I think one of the concerns for this intersection is really speed. and the vastness of it. There's good sight distance on most of it. The problem with sight distance, I think, is that Maple Lane problem that has been problematic for us. In fact, we were allowing that flashing yellow turning movement. We prohibited that because we were seeing people get hit there. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. And quickly, if you don't mind, Bob, then Henry. And we'll move on to the number 2. Sir?
I have one comment on this particular option 1 and a couple 3 that are, just a general vague. On option 1, if you have 3 lanes turning from 213 onto Beaver Creek South, not only do you have the Maple Lane connection that's going to be a potential problem, but you also have 3 entrances into the shopping center, one of which is right at that intersection, and you don't have any place for an exit to get to those entrances into the shopping area, and it might be advisable to move the entrance and exit on the shopping center to the far south connection to allow some room in there. And if it's time or if not for the other 2 observations.
Go ahead.
Okay. We need to pay more attention to the pedestrian crossings here. In the last couple of days, we've had a fatality pedestrian at that intersection. Also, I'd like to know if anybody had looked at full lane reversal for both Beaver Creek and 213. I know it's a concept that's used on the overpasses and underpasses nowadays. It might work for this intersection. And thirdly, I'd like to know if anybody's looked at making further connections like Morton Road, extending that and making that a connection to allow a parallel connection into and out of across this area, like we used to have before the highway was built through there.
Susie, did you want to speak to the full lane reversal at all? Whether or not you've looked at that, yeah.
No, I haven't. We haven't looked at lane reversal. I mean, I think the displaced left is one of those kind of first steps. Right. And yes, something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Quickly, Bob, sir, just round us out, I think, on alternative 1, and then Christine. Go ahead and flip your card up, Christine, otherwise I'll miss you. Go ahead, but go ahead, please, Bob.
Say alternative
2. I've listened. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I've listened to the suggestions here, and I think they're all fine and good. But I think that this intersection really does exceed the urban growth boundary, and it's going to express itself as a major intersection in the county. And we're talking about the city here. There's pass-through traffic from both the Molalla and the Beaver Creek area that are just that have to be served. And unless the county and the city and Metro and the state get together and get serious about land use and build out and the volume of traffic that's going to escalate, this here is just not going to work. Now, if you're going to get serious about planning, think money. That's when you get serious. You put your money down on the table, and you know.
That's what we're here for.
You start showing your cards. What I'm saying is, let's get aggressive about this more than we have tonight, because this thing is going to get out of hand a lot sooner than we hope or than we expect. We've all experienced it. Christina's experienced it in Los Angeles. We're beginning to experience it here in Portland. What I'd like to see is an aggressive program for funding this thing. Technically, we can design this thing if we get our act together. But we haven't mentioned how we're going to fund it. Congress, the state legislature, Metro, local government are all players in this thing. But if you're really serious about planning, Just show me the money.
Well, it's we've seen costs for up to $5 and $25 million, which is obviously a wildly ranging set of alternatives, but we haven't talked about the process by which any of them would be funded. And so just for everyone's understanding, Susie or Laura, if you'd like to explain what list these get on and how they compete, et cetera.
Yeah, I'll probably defer to John, but I mean, the first step is if the reason this problem is falling on the city to kind of come up with a solution and be the convener is because this is the intersection that really it's the city's land use decisions that are most impacted by the failure of this intersection, even though people from the whole region get to experience this intersection. But so I think the state is looking to the city to understand, what would the city like to have here, and then we can kind of talk about funding. The first step is getting it amended into the city's TSP, but that has to come with a financial commitment that I'll let John kind of talk about. There's a variety of funding sources, but there would be participation from the county, from ODOT, through state funds, most likely in this intersection, but that still comes with a requirement for some local funds, which could come from SDCs or the road fund. But I'll let John talk a little bit more about what funding a $5 or $10 million improvement would look like. Or 25.
Yeah, I think some of those $5 and $10 million solutions are attainable. We get a lot of pushback from a lot of folks on our current SDCs. We run one of the highest SDCs in the state, so this project would be funded partially through SDCs. If you're talking more like an interchange, Bob, if you're talking something bigger than what you've seen today, that would have to become a statewide priority. And what I've seen through the state funding, even the federal funding, the demand is far exceeding. And when I think of the traffic problems at this intersection compared to traffic problems in it's frustrating for me that the city is put in this position for this intersection when I don't have to go too far down the road to sit through real congestion. This is congestion. It's Oregon City congestion. It's different than what we're used to dealing with as a city. If you go to other places in the metro region, and like I said, you don't have to go far. Clackamas County has other places that are much more difficult and you're going to sit through many more lights than you do in this case. So it's hard for me to imagine how the state is going to allocate federal funding or state funding or Clackamas County funding. I know it's not going to happen with Clackamas County because they just don't have the support across the county from its voters to really even fund maintenance of the systems that we have. So it is, I think what we're trying to come up with is a solution that all of which I see are at around that 0.9 V over C. That's for 1 hour, right? Mm-hmm. For 1 hour, you would see congestion that would be close to meeting the full capacity in an intersection, any one of these. So there's at least that other 0.1% that we have that we'd be building into this. And then there's the other question to me, which is 1 hour, should it be higher? Can it be higher? Can we live with congestion for a longer duration and call our peak hour a longer period? That's where I think this kind of leads us to. First of all, it's a combination of solutions. What can we build in the form of capital that will get us to a point where we can eke out as much V over C as we can? What can we do to make sure it's safe so pedestrians, bicyclists, and we're not going to see enough pedestrians and bicyclists to make a difference on our V over C on this intersection, but we can make them safe, and we want to make them safe so that so it's functioning as a community. So we want to get there. So we want safety. We want the best V over C that we can get. And I think we're going to have to figure out what can we live with in terms of congestion beyond what the standard allows in the state. And that, I think, is in that maybe it's in that $10 to $15 million range, which is going to hurt Oregon City and SDCs. I think we need to advocate for our county folks to start figuring out how to pony up. It's nice to have growth in Molalla. It's nice to have jobs in Molalla. But why does Oregon City have to carry that full burden of solution? It is a state problem. It's a statewide problem. So trying to get that to happen, I think, is the uphill battle. This study, I mean, states looking at this. They're recognizing that. So I think we're in the right direction.
John, I think you hit the nail on the head. We've got to stop thinking about this intersection as being an Oregon City problem. It's not. We've got pass-through traffic that originates from other regions that we have no control over.
So just as a principle, let's assume that we are considering it a city, county, regional, and state federal problem.
Yeah.
And I think we just assume that, sir, and we need to move on to the other alternatives, but your final point on that. I mean, no one's disagreeing.
Yep.
Well, in my final comment on this is if we don't come up with some sort of a policy recommendation in terms of funding and looking at this as a regional issue instead of an Oregon City issue, I think what we're doing is we're wasting our time.
Well, I think that's where we're headed. So please, stay with us for the next 2 meetings, because we know that no one does it alone these days in terms of funding almost anything. So thanks for your encouragement there. I would like to move on and just touch through the remaining alternatives if we could. We have heard a couple of suggestions for this alternative. So Susie, on alternative 1, if I don't know if you want to recap them, but I know Christine has them. So thanks for your guidance on those fixes. You'll see them first, if we can, in the meeting summary. I would encourage us to send out the summary too, that we just identify those fixes, and then, of course, the next packet won't come out till closer to our next meeting. But if we get the summary out and you can check those corrections, that would be helpful. On alternative, does anyone want to advocate to maintain alternative 2? I'm seeing heads nodding negatively. So should we agree? Is everyone okay to discard this one? And this is the ever popular Quadrant Road alternative. Thumbs down it. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Everyone okay with that? Okay, all right. And Christine and Dan, I know I wasn't able to get to your comments on that first, but go ahead and put if you don't mind, if you don't have a standing comment right now on these alternatives, go ahead and put your flag down if you don't mind. Thank you. On to alternative 3, the southbound displaced left turn. Any questions or comments on this guy? Anyone particularly like it? Commissioner, please.
I'm just wondering, because I know ODOT's a real stickler about distance. It doesn't seem like it's very far for where it curves over, and that might raise safety issues on their part.
You're saying that this distance from here to here?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, and that would get fine-tuned based on looking at exactly how much queue storage there needs to be. I think this is 150 or 200 feet, which is typical of these types of intersections on kind of 4 to 5 lane cross sections, but that would get fine-tuned. But part of the reason why it's close is it's really only intended to be to store as many vehicles as would arrive per cycle of the signal. It stores them there and then moves them. You don't want it to get long because you want them to be just the right amount of vehicles that can go through on that green. I'll try to distribute a video of what this looks like, but I will say I mentioned they're being used heavily in other places in the country, and particularly the state of Utah. DOT is constructing these everywhere, and particularly on corridors, long state highways, intersection after intersection after intersection as like their intersection treatment on particular expressways. Yeah.
Can you just run through how that operates again one more time?
I can. So if you want to turn left, instead of coming southbound left, so you're coming from I-205 and you want to head out Beaver Creek, you would get signs that would say left turn in advance, and so you would know instead that when you're traveling up here that if you're going to turn left, you get into the lanes here. So there's a traffic signal here that when you approach may be green. So you might stop here until these movements are going. When these movements are going, you would get a green light, excuse me. Looking at colors and it's confusing my mouth here. You would get a green light and you would get to proceed down to here. And this would kind of store up. When it was time for the through movements on 213 to get green lights, that's when the left turns would also get a green. So these movements would get a green. At the same time, the southbound through is going, and the northbound through is going. Now, that's where this interaction of this signal comes in. The northbound through, you want to get this timed such that the northbound through never really gets stopped at this red light. And they would be coordinated such that it doesn't happen. Somebody who maybe comes from the side could get stopped at a red light here while some of these cars transition over. But does that kind of make a little bit more sense?
And this was one that the technical group did advise advancing. Is anyone in this group against advancing this one? Should we carry this one forward? Or Luke, are you okay with the bike and the ped crossing here? Do you have any questions about how?
Oh yeah. Well, I think thank you. I think for this one, of all the ones presented, it seems the best because it has for people walking and biking, since there isn't a increased crossing distance, which does make it more likely to be in a crash. An increased crossing distance only means a longer wait time, so it's more likely that people will try to jump out and increase the chance of a crash. I wonder if we increase, or if we're creating that new right-hand turn lane there, yes, if there's a chance to look at the existing bike facilities and move away from the bike lane in the middle of traffic there and looking at a shared use path south of there, or a protected intersection. Because right now, if you're heading on Beaver Creek driving, there's not great visibility looking if somebody's in the bike lane, and being in the bike lane there, it's challenging with cars moving over to get into that right-hand turn lane.
Yes, I think what you're highlighting, one of the advantages of these types of treatments is this crossing distance. When pedestrians are crossing the main part of the roadway, this crossing distance is actually shorter narrower than under existing conditions. But you do have introduced a secondary crossing of like the right, where before they might have just been crossing the right turn lane to get to the little island. In many cases now you've kind of got that happening twice. But this is also controlled by a signal. So you've got you're breaking up the crossing where you're only kind of looking at threats in kind of one direction and reducing the overall crossing distance at one time.
Thanks. So this one has merit from your perspective. I think, Dan, you've been waiting, and then also Christine on this one.
Two quick things, and it relates to my comment before and to this, and it's just a consideration. I don't know how to lay out a consideration of eliminating pedestrian crossings on the north side of Beaver Creek, enhancing them only on the south side of Beaver Creek, and maybe that makes it safer for the pedestrian, but and then opens up some little longer time for turning. Now, I'm for bike and ped and everything, but is there a case here to be made to make it really nice on the south side of Beaver Creek and eliminate it on the north from Maple Lane to that intersection?
So perhaps to consider, Susie, in the next round, is that okay if we don't ponder that too much as a group here right now, but for you to look at?
Yeah, that's fine. Just a comment. And then second of all, the idea of this crossover, I just want us to keep in mind of the slope and the topography of that hill. It's a lot slower getting started coming up, as was described earlier, than going down. And I just think that there's going to be not as much gain as we might anticipate because of some of that.
The topography. Thank you. Christine, and then Mike on this alternative 3, please.
I think this was about this plan and the other plans as well. There was a comment made earlier, I didn't quite catch all of it, about Martin Road, maybe bringing that through. I just wanted to comment on Martin Road. It has the second largest landslide on it on Highway 213, and Dogami has written a huge paper on that landslide, stating that if anyone ever even considered development in that area, it would need full-blown geological studies. And they pretty much suggest not even going there.
Right. Thank you. Thanks. Good. Everyone's writing and writing. Thank you. Please, Mike.
Just two concerns. If I'm understanding that right, the first left turn southbound, where do those people stack up? And aren't they in the curve? And won't that be really dangerous because you're coming around that S curve?
Up here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's just something that caught my eye. And then the only other thing is, I hate to be a broken record, but now that second left turn is even closer to Maple Lane. Now there's less room to get people out of the way on Maple Lane.
It's okay. You can beat a consistent drum. It's okay. If it's a problem, it's a problem. So thank you. And I like your out of the box thinking above the aerial on this one too. So I know Susie's making note of that as well. Thank you. I mean, you travel this so often, everyone around the table. So thank you for your applied perspectives. So 3 has enough merit perhaps to carry forward. Anyone object to that? No one objecting? Okay, then why don't we click forward to alternative 4 there. So this is it has 2 displaced left turns. And so Henry, would you like to kick us off on this one? Then Mike?
For my money, this and 3 are pretty much the same thing. What I see up there in terms of stacking is that Beaver Creek from the Fred Meyer out in Fur Lane has a tremendous left lane need for stacking at all times of the day, pretty much. That 213 coming up the hill toward Beaver Creek has a tremendous need for left-hand stacking at all times. That Beaver Creek coming from the community college toward Fred Meyer and 213 has less stacking need because it's either straight across or the free right. And so trying to deal with the traffic trying to make those 2 tremendous left turns seems to be the most long-term value here.
Thank you. Great, Mike.
Oh, sorry, no.
No, yeah, there's one last one. Okay, great. Anyone else, please?
Could you provide, you mentioned that the technical committee recommended 1 and 3 and not 4. Could you provide maybe some guidance on why not 4 from their perspective?
Yes. And it really had to do with the additional cost of the improvements in this corner and how impactful they would be, both from a cost standpoint, because that retaining wall there is about at least 15 feet tall, plus there's seismic concerns up, landslide concerns up this creek. So just the overall concerns about touching anything on this side of the roadway and its implications to cost for, it maybe not returning a, commensurate benefit. John or Dana, anybody can remember any other fatal flaws on that?
I struggle with 3 and 4, but 4, having just recently seen that walk down into that canyon on what we'll call the Forest Edge Apartments corner, where we've just experienced the landslide, and any of these that really seem to me to be impactful to landslide. This one is short of the interchange kind of solutions, this one has some fatal flaws, in my opinion.
But there's 2 sides to a road, and you don't have to widen on that side.
Shift the whole operation south.
Yeah. Right. Bring everything a little further south.
Change your center line, basically.
Yeah. Determine the walls or the boundary and what.
Exactly.
And one thing about limiting pedestrian, you pick up that sidewalk distance. I'm not saying it's right yet, but you then move everything south.
You can move that whole road south.
Very
Something
interesting.
to look at.
Susie, you get that? Would you committee members like to keep that on the table to just look at that and see if that's feasible? And the commissioner's saying yes, so.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying that I'm a strong advocate for 4, but I think that same thinking.
You got other head nods. You're
on
not
3.
You're not alone. Same thinking on 3. So
Yeah.
I mean, and 3 and 4, looking at
Right.
and moving away from the land side essentially.
Really, any of them.
Yeah. Yeah. The impacts on the property to the south, of course, is what we'll run into.
Yeah.
But we'll take
Yeah,
that
I
up
think
at
it's
the
a
next
good
meeting.
point. I think you can see that there's some right of way in here. These lines are basically the property lines and are, we assume, to be pretty consistent with the right of way. So you could move these roads, push them south a little bit, but you'd just note that you'd also have to move 213 to the east, because to get this curve, it needs to kind of move this way.
Well, imagine you're on number 3 there instead.
Yeah. So there'd be moving south, but there'd also just note that there'd be moving of 213 east. So you'd have kind of impacts in here to the structure, the road,
We
the
can move
road
it east,
structure.
though. I know the property owner won't care if we can move his territory. Oh, that was you, isn't it, Dan? Sorry about that.
So with south comes east, but we can look at that.
So keep that on for number 4.
Yeah.
Committee members, all right? Yes? Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, we're heading into interchange land then, and you've given us both your comments and questions and your guidance on these, so you've picked up some time. But we are closing in on 8, and we want to be respectful of your time. So how are folks feeling about, I would just take the full suite of interchanges up, really. How are folks feeling about that? Susie, could you give us an update on why the TAC did not recommend advancing any of the interchange configurations?
Well, primarily due.
You might have to come up to the
Oh,
microphone.
Sure. Sorry. Well, it had to do with cost, and that the TSP process had just gone through that evaluation of costs and impact and priorities. The city had very recently, kind of through full engagement, looking at the city, the transportation plan citywide, made a decision that we are going to be removing an interchange from this intersection. So I think that was definitely underlying it, but there was just some question of, we just wanted to kind of double check, were there some with the half interchange or a tight interchange? Wanted to make sure that we hadn't missed anything when we took a look at these things, but I think they were seeing that all 3 alternatives were very impactful, were going to be high cost, and didn't really think there was anything that would cause them to want to, reverse their decision through the TSP.
And maybe this is the time to just put up the comparison chart. Not to say we can't take up any of the, if you can flip forward just 3 slides to that chart.
Sure.
Not to say we can't talk about any of the individual interchanges, but they do have kind of a thread in common, which is their cost, and of course being recently removed through the public process.
Alternatives 5, 6, and 7. So although they're green because they're providing benefit from a capacity and VC standpoint, we got very high right-of-way impacts on already developed property, environmental impacts to the northwest and northeast quadrants. In larger quantity than some of the other alternatives. From a bike and pedestrian standpoint, they're moving to 2 intersections to be traveled through instead of 1. Very high cost, and again, I think these are low numbers. And that's it. This column is about whether we'd be restricting movements, which
thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, they're available at a glance. I appreciate, folks.
See the error there.
Bob's earlier
Apologize
recommendation to be thinking large about improvements, and even with 5 to 10 million, we know we'd have to engage county, regional, and state partners in that. I think, Damon, you were up first, then Commissioner, and then Christine. Let's go this way, please.
Back to your chart.
Yep, the green. Yep, thanks.
First, your eliminates movements on 5, 6, and 7. I think they're backwards.
They are. I just realized that.
Okay. Good. Okay, we agree on that.
We agree on that.
5 should be no. 6 and 7 should be yes.
Six should be six should be pink and yes, and 5 should be green and no. So 5 and 6 are swapped.
Okay, 5 and 6 are swapped.
I think 5 and 7 are essentially the same thing. It's just how much impact, right-of-way impact it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're going to do it, we should do it right. I think 6 is is the same as 2. I mean, if you're going to direct people so far out of the way that it becomes functionally useless. As far as the impacts to the slide zone, the north, east, west corner, whatever, I mean, a lot of that can be mitigated, by instead of having full roadways, you just have the pillars or the pilings to lift the road up for the ramp. Yeah, it's going to cost a butt ton of money. But again, it also provides the most security, I guess, for lack of a better term, of outside growth. As Mola and Canby and Malino and Beaver Creek and everybody else starts, growing, that's the cleanest way.
Do you have a preference between 5 and 7?
I think there's a 5.5 or a 7 negative half. I mean, you drew the normal widths, and I think you can have, like, for instance, and those are a little shorter again. But I look at I just completely spaced on it. Nyberg Road. That off ramp parallels the road, and at the last minute does a little S, and it is a little tiny impact. I mean, Sherry's is gone, right. But that's all it's impacted is Sherry's, not all that parking lot and stuff. So I think there's ways to engineer something between 5 and 7. And if we come up with $25 million, then it'd be easy to make that happen. So I think, again, I would rather keep 5 and 7 on that and get rid of 6.
I appreciate that.
For the discussion.
Thank you. Would like to hear from Commissioner and then do a time check.
Just real quick, though, I have an alternative 8 that nobody has said anything about, and everybody's going to go, oh crap, when I say it. But why not a traffic circle?
Oh crap.
You only got one of those.
I'm sorry, but I've been in Europe. I've seen major 5-lane highways intersect in a traffic circle.
So let's hear from Susie.
We, as Americans, are too stupid to use them, but we got to learn.
Kittelson's done a few of them around the state. So Susie, on a traffic circle treatment for here?
Yes, from a type of facility and volumes, it seems like it could be a good option. I think the main reason we did not look at it further was just because of the property impacts. I mean, you
could do a 3-lane traffic circle easy, possibly 4 in that space. So
we would be looking at a circular when you're talking about that in the realm of 200 feet.
You don't need to do that.
It is an ODOT facility, and they would have at least a 200-foot diameter on center. So.
Not a bad thought, but you have a state facility.
I do appreciate your comment about some of these being able to be on, pillars and minimizing the impacts, and that's, more challenging and a roundabout would really require.
And I guess I'd challenge ODOT's 200-foot minimum is crap.
Certainly, I would think that we could. Probably confirm that and then send out just a note advisory in the summary of what their feedback on that was. But thank you. I mean, thanks for bringing up what would seem to be logical. Commissioner?
Yes. Well, I do like the idea of keeping an interchange option on the table. I don't think we should constrain ourselves. If this is really the ultimate best solution in the long term, we should at least explore it. And alternative 7, which is narrower and has less land impacts, would perhaps be less expensive. And you look at the map and you see parking lots and green space. It's not like we're tearing down buildings. So, in terms of right-of-way acquisition, it's probably less impactful than otherwise. And I think for the general public...
Gentlemen, sorry, we are picking you up, so if you don't mind, we're hearing Commissioner out. Thanks.
So I think for the general Oregon City public that is very concerned about this intersection, if we don't explore an intersection option, they're not going to understand why.
Sure, good. Okay, so keep one on the table, and your preference would be 7, and there might be a hybrid 7- or 5+. Is everyone else okay with keeping an interchange? No one would veto that. Everyone okay with it? We get 2 thumbs up. I think, Bob, you'd say yes, go big or go home. Please, yeah.
Damon, just feel free to Bust it anytime you want to, it's a 4-letter word.
I was going to say, remember our civility. I don't think we covered civility in the protocol, but go ahead.
It's more than just moving traffic. It's land use. If you want to stifle land use, think small. You're talking about employment. You're talking about a tax base that's going to expand. Traffic safety is high on the agenda, but you got to think big on this intersection because it's going to affect your industrial land use patterns. It's going to affect commercial and the economy and the viability of a community because of moving traffic. And so you're going to have to think outside because it does traffic and land use. And I'm preaching to the choir here, but traffic and land use are related. So you can't eliminate land use just by thinking only of the intersection. If you do that, you'll think small on the intersection. You got to think long-term land use and how do we move traffic and how do we complement land use with the movement of traffic. So if you don't do that, you're going to kill a city.
Appreciate that. So, folks, we are almost at 8, and I'm not sure if we even stay recorded after 8. Is it possible to continue to record after 8? Okay. So, would you be willing to stay 15 more minutes to close out the discussion? Looking at city leadership here.
I'm willing, but some people,
15 minutes, 8:15. All right. Okay with that, folks? Okay. So last comments on keeping an interchange on the table, sir.
Well, I think we should keep it on the table. One thing we should recognize is $1 million doesn't buy $1 million worth of stuff anymore. It hasn't for a very long time. What we really should be thinking about is how much would $50 million get us? Because it's probably what it's going to come closer to when we actually have the ability to build it. And redevelopment of existing lots go on all the time. And this is nothing more than redevelopment of the shopping center and existing lands around there that we're talking about. And if it helps 50,000 people as compared to keeping the shopping center, that's a valuation that'll have to be made at some time.
Well, we will have the opportunity to debate if we keep an interchange on. We'll have ample opportunity in the upcoming meetings to debate, to compare the cost and the strategy associated with an ag-rate improvements versus an interchange. And I am mindful of just the recent public process on the transportation system plan. So we know we're probably likely to get some testimony if we keep interchanges on. So in the future meeting agendas, we will want to allow time for public comment. There's no one here tonight to join us from just general citizens not on the CAG, but in our future meetings, we'll include some time for that. So folks who participated in the last TSP, for example, may want to weigh in on that as well. Christine, you have your tag up, but then I'd like to have Susie just address, I think we made our way through the alternatives. There is the second question on the agenda really gets, and we won't spend another 2 hours on that, but shall we be investigating the alternate mobility targets? And Mr. Lewis touched on that, for example, looking at not 1 but 2 hours. So let's touch on that before we go on what's ahead of us on that. If there's anything you want to ask the CAG on that. But first, Christine, wrapping up the alternatives. Any final comments?
I just have a question about the, I think it was alternative 6 on the full diamond.
Please, yeah, why don't we go to that one?
Full diamond is at 5. Yeah, that one. Even though it has a large footprint, say development catches up to you sooner than you think, and now you have the intersection overloaded again, would this give you a little bit more wiggle room in the future to make changes that don't cost so much money?
Susie or John, on an interchange as opposed to an intersection improvement strategy? Does it give you more flexibility in the longer term?
Well, I think because of the V over C at 8.8, I think it gives you that much more potential, and I'm sure in some movements we would have a lot of capacity, right? Yeah, we would have tons of capacity. So, Yeah.
Well, for people heading just through on 213, they don't stop at all. Basically this becomes like you're on the highway. Yeah, there's no stopping if you're north-south. And there's less stopping east-west because you're not having to accommodate, stop for this through movement. So, but as far as like to continue to provide additional capacity and the cost of it, I think at that point these roads will not be able to put more demand through that interchange. You'd have other things bottling it up probably before you need to expand that interchange.
Don't handle so much, right?
And then you do bring in by that time you're into the question of what are we riding in at that point in time? It will be a very interesting question. Hopefully some things will evolve or at least get cleaner fuels. I have to do something about that. On 5 and 7, Susie and the technical team, Dana, we didn't spend a lot of time interpolating between the two and which might be favored for members of the committee to advance. Is it okay to just kind of keep both or a hybrid on for now?
I think what we're hearing is still keeping a full interchange, but full tight interchange, whether it be what's considered traditional diamond or single point, kind of on the table.
Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, Kelly. How did I miss you? Gesture at me. Pardon me.
No, I just had a simple question. The TSP studied the V over C, I think 2011, is that right? Is the data that we have. And it was 0.83 in 2011. Do we know what that is closer to today at all, or is that the best data that we have?
We do have new counts that we just used to validate whether the growth was what was projected, but no, we have not looked at what is that telling us about today yet.
But it's probably similar to 0.8, like maybe a little higher.
A little higher, yep.
So
probably
I'm
0.9.
Probably close to 0.9. So that means like I'm looking at this alternative 5 at 0.82. That means that 0.83, that 2011 level of congestion would essentially be maintained. So that's interesting.
Update them all? In other words, should we update all the V over C numbers?
No. I'm just saying it's interesting to think about spending 25 million to essentially maintain
current conditions.
See what you were at in 2011,
right? And it's just interesting. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't have any more current data. But thank you.
Can I add one quick comment about the money part of it? So when we did the TSP, we have we had some improvements identified, and we certainly asked ODOT, since Highway 213 is their facility, if they had any funding to help support this work. And the answer then was no, we don't. And if we did, we wouldn't put that much money there. And we asked the county if they have any money to help support this because they have a leg of the intersection too. And the answer was the same, no. And so I appreciate getting it right and being cautious and thoughtful that we have enough capacity for a long time, because we certainly don't want to be here in this pickle again. But doing this study now, we asked them again, do they want to fund this study? And the answer is no. And John is funding all of it. So maybe, certainly as a part of this discussion, is does the county and ODOT and anybody else want to help pay for this? But just knowing there's some equity stuff going on, and being cautious of large improvements and who pays. And if it's Oregon City, what does that mean? And where's that come from?
Good cautions. Yeah, totally.
Well, and the risks. Okay, so what are the risks to the city? If we might say, gosh, we think alternative 4 is just so cost effective, we get great benefits, it's going to be great. We want alternative 4, and we're going to put it in the TSP, but technically it's not financially constrained, it's not in the fundable plan. we want to keep lobbying for money for it and trying to build support, build coalition, try to get people to help us fund it. But for the time being, it could be amended into the plan, but it is not considered funded. From a reviewing land use standpoint and zone changes, that is as good as not being there. There's still value of it being in your TSP to communicate and try to build momentum, build a coalition. But from a development review and zone change review perspective, it doesn't have hold any weight. So you're in that position where you've said as a city, this is what we want to build towards, this is our vision, but we might recognize that it's not in the cost-constrained plan. Therefore, we need an alternative mobility standard if we're going to help build out some of the city's vision plans.
Are you saying it's potential to do both, to do a hybrid strategy, in other words?
I think there is. And I think that's part of what we're looking for guidance on, and maybe this kind of recognition that probably the city on its own cannot get this straight-faced into their TSP as a cost-constrained plan without making significant compromises to the rest of the capital improvement plan. But is there value in going through this process to come up with a solution to say we don't want to have no solution long-term on the books, but we do need to recognize that we might still need an alternative mobility standard and use this preferred solution that we come up through this process as the starting point for trying to build regional support for the project. But until that regional support all comes together, that the region decides we want to make this a cost-constrained plan, we have impacts to the city and property owners in being able to do anything until that all coalesces.
Can I make just one quick point? Sorry, it'll be really quick. We're not looking to do this so we can do a bunch of zone changes. I wanted to highlight that we have a legal obligation, not only an obligation to the community and people in Oregon City and those outside, but a legal obligation to solve this with a solution which is feasible.
So maybe that hybrid solution is something we're going to have to benchmark for our next discussion. John wants us to make sure that we talk about this alternative mobility target question, Susie. So what do you need to know from the group? What are our choices in the alternative mobility target suite?
Well, that is stuff that we're working on right now. It's going to be the subject of our next meeting, but I think we were hoping for some validation that, yes, we should also keep talking about alternative mobility standards for this kind of pickle situation that I was kind of referring to, just to make sure that you guys are on board with us, that we want to talk about that subject too. And that's what we'll be talking about next.
Can you give us some such ases?
Such ases. So looking at, say, the volume to capacity ratio of, 0.99 standard that's there now, saying we're going to accept, those kinds of conditions for 3 hours a day or 5 hours a day. So accepting, it's kind of talking about how many hours a day are we willing to have that standard that threshold be exceeded. It could be kind of moving away from volume to capacity to talk about delay. How long does it take me to get through that intersection when I'm on the worst leg? Does it take me 3 minutes? Or does it take me 6 minutes? Which is a kind of a function of how many signals you wait through. We could move to just purely looking at safety. Is the crash rate staying the same over time, or are we actually reducing it despite increasing levels of congestion? So we'll be bringing kind of a menu of different types of approaches we could look at, and that's what we'll be discussing as to which of these alternative options seem most appropriate to you all.
So no one would leave the room if Susie brought those types of things back, I hope. No. So that would be okay. I think that's just more of a heads up, and it is really a question that there's a variety of other things, as long as we're looking at full interchange on one hand, that we look on other strategies on the other hand to allow development to occur with short-term fixes while we lobby for longer-term strategy, perhaps. So getting some head nods there. Please, Rick, a final comment or question?
I just was wondering, each of these things obviously has different timelines in which they could be implemented. Could you give us some kind of sense of that for maybe the next meeting? Obviously, if you're looking at a $30 million full interchange versus a maybe $10 million short-term fix, the funding process would certainly take considerably longer to find those dollars. I mean, there's something to be said for what can be done in a reasonable time frame, and then, you know, versus something that maybe is going to take you 15 years to do.
Yeah.
So that'll
Okay,
come back.
we'll
We'll
try
bring
to
that back.
up and
Good.
discuss that further at the next meeting.
Nathan and Michelle, I just want to make sure, do you have any questions or concerns? You okay with the suite of options we're advancing? Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. But I'm going to look at you and make sure we're still between the rails here for you and the business community.
Likewise.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good. Okay. So last comment, please. And I think we'll be ready to have Dana take us home here.
In closing, all I want to emphasize is the longer we spend at an intersection and the less efficient it is, the more money it costs everybody. A truck at an intersection that needs to get to market with essential goods, it's just costing them money. And if it costs them money, they're not going to locate in Clackamas County. So we've got to tie this to the cost of doing business, not only public safety and efficiency of moving traffic, but the cost that it puts on the public at large and industry.
Thank you.
That's a key. That is absolutely a key.
Thank you. So our next meeting is coming right up on February 2nd. Big question Dana asked Susie is, if we push this meeting out, this one due to snow, can we still make February 2nd? And Susie said yes. So I think we're on track. But Dana, any final words for us as we look to next steps? Or sorry, who's doing it?
Well, I don't know if Dana planned to say this, but
Okay, please.
So I wanted to say this. So at our technical advisory committee with state in the room and recognition of some of the annexations that are going on in the Holcomb Road area, ODOT has asked us to expand the look to include Redland Road. Now, this project actually has implications there that we would look at anyway, but we need to talk internally as a team about. We have design work for Redland Road that came out of the Jug Handle project, which is the interchange there at Washington and 213 near 205. When we did that, we also included a design phase for some improvements at Redland Road. So beyond that, you know, how much look is there? Probably not much, but we need to talk about it internally. We're definitely bringing it to the technical advisory group, and which means we would bring it to this group as well. And I just didn't want that to be a huge surprise to you, wondering why we're talking about Redland Road, because that's just another important interchange on the same corridor.
Thank you. Dana. Make sure you're on your microphone there. Anybody. 30 seconds or less. Because they've all read it by now.
Yeah, so we've got the next meeting is scheduled for February 2nd. We'll send out the packet information on that, and I'll send out the meeting announcement to everyone as well. So that's kind of when the next meeting is.
I think the last 2 points there, just to make sure you guys are aware that ultimately the recommendations that come out of this process would need to be amended into the TSP, whether we have an alternative mobility target or an improvement or both. So these will need to result as TSP amendments. If it's the alternative mobility target, there's also a process of getting basically ODOT to approve it and ODOT to recommend it to the Oregon Transportation Commission for it to actually become the guiding standard that kind of governs that intersection. So
this has been terrific feedback, though, I think, for the consulting team and for staff. So
Very.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And since you mentioned the TSP, one little other piece, you know, we have had an SDC forum meeting. Some of you attended a few months ago. We've since asked DKS to look at our project list, look at our project estimates, with the idea of doing a new look, a revised look, or an updated look at our transportation SDCs. So that's another meeting that's out there. It's not that you don't have to attend, but we will be announcing that meeting. We haven't set a date yet for that, but it's interesting, the question about funding and how to fund these projects, and you start looking at really, a city as a whole and what its obligations should be for safety and pedestrians and bicycles and driving solutions. The project numbers add up quickly, and there's not many revenue streams other than development fees, so we're looking at those.
Thank you all. We'll see you on February 10th. February 2nd. Well, yeah, that's right. We'll be here. Thank you.
I need a blanket.
Yeah.
We all need like snuggies under our, on our legs.
Are you cold?